having me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a little bit more interactive. So I'm going to spend less time on the story and more time on the Q&A so that we can have a discussion going, so I can understand the kind of questions you have, what you're more interested in finding out about. So just a brief introduction about myself, who I am, and what my company does. As you mentioned, I'm Nona. The company name is, my name is called Nona. And what we try to do is we want to make it easy for people to live a healthy lifestyle by eating well. And we do that by providing in the grocery stores products such as fresh soups that are non-GMO, gluten-free, dairy-free. We have a line of bone broths, which is very trendy these days. Also a line of fresh ramen and fresh rice noodles. So that's what we do now. Our products are found nationally at Whole Foods. We are in NorCal Safeway. We're in a bunch of other independent stores, as well as in regional retailers like Gelson's in Southern California. We're going to be in Wegmans in New York, so on and so forth. But when I first started the business, it was totally different. It was nothing like this. And this is what you're going to learn about business. You know, what you start with might not be what you end with. I moved here in 2006. My background was actually not in food. I was a management consultant and a software consultant. So I grew up in Singapore. As you can tell from the accent, it's not very American. I spent 8 years working in London before moving out here. And when I moved out here, two things. One is I definitely noticed that in the US, you know, in California especially here, we have all these wonderful farmers markets, right? Great produce. But if you want to kind of have a quick, convenient meal, 10 years ago, it wasn't easy. So I wanted to make it a little bit more convenient for people to be able to do that at home. At the same time, I was actually fencing competitively as well for Singapore. And I wanted to, you know, figure out how to use food as a way to improve my performance. So I started the business way too early, ahead of its time. It was actually a meal delivery program. I'm sure you guys are familiar with Spoon Rocket, you know, Blue Apron, Hello Fresh, Plated, Gobble, you named it. It's kind of all over the place now. 10 years ago, that didn't exist, and I was actually the first company that started that, which has its ups and downs. So I did that, and what happened was that after trying that out for a few years, I decided that, you know, I'm going to create a food-based detox program based on an elimination diet. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that. So what it does is it takes out all the common food allergens to allow you to cleanse your body naturally, to detoxify. So we would deliver all these meal kits to customers that has breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks. You know, I would teach them what to eat, how to cook, how much to eat. So you'd be getting things like fresh wild salmon with bok choy and a lemon caper dressing. Right? So it'd be a wild Alaskan salmon, you have your lemon caper dressing, you have your veggies, and we'll teach people how to cook that. And the soups were actually snacks on the detox program. So if customers, basically, they lost weight, their cholesterol fell, their triglycerides fell, they went off certain medications. It was huge. It was extremely impactful. And then some of them came to me and said, you know, I love your detox, but I don't want to be on it forever. Which makes sense. Nobody wants to be on detox forever, neither do I. So they said, you know, are there products that we could continue buying to continue that healthy lifestyle in stores? So we looked at our program, you know, what are the products that would translate well in the store? Definitely not the fish, there's no shelf life, you know, and it's not going to last. The salads are going to wilt. So the soups were the one. Those soups were actually snacks on our detox program, and they were made in the same principle, you know, kind of gluten-free, dairy-free, extremely clean, made from scratch. So we said, well, let's package those. So in 2011, we packaged those, and we just took them to the stores, you know, to Berkeley, to Rainbow Grocery, to all the different independents. And within 6 months, we actually got into Whole Foods. So we then started having two businesses. We had an online business, and also then we had the business where we would deliver them to the stores and sell those at the stores. And we just continued growing the businesses in parallel. And then in 2014, I actually decided to shut down the online business to focus on the retail business. And that's where we are today. And today, as I mentioned earlier, we're national with Whole Foods. We're in Safeway, Northern California. We've done a little bit of work, a few rotations with Costco. And we are in a lot of the smaller independents like Andronicos, Molly Stones, New Leaf, PCC, places like that. And that's where we're continuing to grow the business. So that's kind of a short history of where the company came from. And then I want to tell you a little bit about the mistakes we made, and also how after giving you that history and the background, we can now talk about what went wrong, what didn't, and what we learned from it. I think one of the first things that I learned was about innovation. Yeah, I mean, when you start a business, you want to be innovative. but actually you can be too innovative, and that's one thing you want to be careful about. I was innovating on many fronts in 2006. That was before iPhones existed, right? There's no smartphones. People weren't used to, number one, it's like, I have meals delivered to me, okay, that was new. On top of that, I have to cook it. You mean it wasn't like microwavable, it was all these compartments, all these different little kits. I have fish, I have this and that. It's like, wow, why am I ordering from you if I have to actually cook it? I still have to wash my pots and pans, So that was the second point of innovation. On top of that, we decided to make it organic. We're very ahead of our times. It was organic, it was sustainable seafood. We were a member of Seafood Watch. It was grass-fed beef. Not only was it organic, but it was grass-fed, which everybody knows what it is today, but that was back 10 years ago, right? And then it was gluten-free 10 years ago. And then you added dairy-free 10 years ago. So you have this market that's being sliced and sliced and sliced and sliced. So you end up with a very small niche to start with. So not a good idea. Because if you look at it these days, you look at Gobble, Plated, all of them right now. Why they're a little bit more successful in the short term, we'll talk about them a little bit more, is that even then they're doing it at a mass level, right? Because by making it so specific, it meant that my price points were higher. Because organic, sustainable seafood, that's not that cheap. Grass-fed beef, that's not cheap. Whereas what they have now is things that are a little bit more mass, so they're a lot cheaper. On top of that, my menu was much more very Bay Area centric. It's like what you would get in a nice restaurant in the Bay Area, which is not really appropriate for the masses. So the pricing wasn't right. So when you start a business, you want to think about maybe innovating on one or two fronts. You do not want to innovate on so many fronts. Because when you innovate on so many fronts, it means that the hurdle is much higher. It means that to educate your customers, it takes so much more, which can be done if you have a lot of money. But if you're trying to do this on kind of a shoestring, you're trying to bootstrap it, that is a high hurdle, kind of jump over. So that was the first mistake that I made. Right, the second mistake that I made as well is that really learning a little bit around, again, online businesses versus brick and mortar, very different. With selling soups in stores, there's actually a formula behind it. It's been around for decades, maybe even almost a century, right? It's been around forever. You know how to get there, who you need to work with, what the chain looks like, right? You have your brokers, you have your retailers, you have distributors. Whereas what I was trying to do didn't exist at all, right? And with online businesses, so much of it is about customer acquisition, which is why, with these businesses, they did the right thing. Like, HelloFresh went out, raised valuation of $2.1 billion, raised $286 million. Munchtree probably raised over about $20 million. If you look at every one of those, they've gone out and raised a ton of money, which is the right thing to do because you do need to get that scale to be profitable. Having said that though, it would be interesting to see, I think there are over 70 of them out there right now. I'm not sure in 5 years how many will actually still be around. I think as you mentioned earlier, spoon market doesn't quite exist anymore.
Yeah.
A lot of them will continue to go out of business. And the reason for that is because most of them are spending so much money on marketing and customer acquisition and also on subsidizing the actual operating costs. You can only do that, for so long. If you've got investors who are willing to throw money at you, if all they care about is top line, that's fine. But at the end of the day, meal delivery is actually still real business. You could make use of technology to acquire customers, to help optimize your distribution, to do a lot of cool things, but there's still ingredients involved. So it doesn't scale like Twitter. It doesn't scale like some of the other pure tech plays where you're operating, where your costs, your cost of goods sold does not decrease just because you have 1 million customers. Your costs, you might get some savings by being able to buy your ingredients cheaper, but it's not as if it's fixed. Whereas in technology, a lot of times your cost is pretty fixed, right? You guys are understanding what I'm saying. If it's not clear, I'm coming up with acronyms that you're not as familiar with, feel free to raise your hand, and ask me to explain it. So I think that because of that, that is going to be a challenge in terms of how many of them would actually survive. Just kind of an example would be Goodings. I'm not sure, are you guys familiar with Goodings? Mm-hmm. So Goodings.com, go look them up. They are kind of like an online farmers market. So what they do is the same farmers, the produce that you're buying for at your Berkeley, farmers market, they are selling those products online and they're delivering it to you. when they first started their business, what they do is that, for $30, they'll do a free delivery to your home. And they are based in Potrero in San Francisco. And they'll deliver it to you for free all over. If you're in Berkeley Hills, Oakland Hills, think about how far that is, right? To drive for $30 plus the toll, right? And on top of that, if $30 would be your groceries, like you buy a bunch of vegetables for $30, they were taking maybe a 25% margin of that. So that gives them $7.50. $7.50 is supposed to pay for the driver that they're paying $17 an hour to drive over. Yeah, the mileage that the driver is going to be charging, the toll that the driver has to pay going across, plus whatever else that they're running their operations with. So it doesn't matter how much they sell. Would that actually ever make them money? I'm not sure. Which is why they've increased over time, so that now the minimum purchase requirement is $60, and they've increased the commission to 30%. Even then we'll see how much more skill is needed for them to actually break even. In the meantime, they're just burning investor money. So one thing you want to think about, right, when you're starting your business is, what is the cost structure going to look like? Because if your cost structure is never going to work out, it doesn't matter how big you are. Especially we're talking about, a business where you're talking about any sort of products. We're not talking about technology. Technology is very different, right? When you have a platform, you could have 1 billion people using the same platform. It doesn't cost more. Maybe it costs more a little bit in terms of bandwidth, so on and so forth. But if you're talking about a business that requires either, tangible things, then you want to make sure that your cost structure is going to work eventually. So you need to have that gross margin. And you might not be profitable still because that, like for example, for food manufacturing businesses, you really need to get to about $5 to $10 million to even start being a sustainable standalone business, just to give you a sense. If you want to crack the grocery space, we're not talking about selling things at the farmer's market, right? But you want to have a gross margin that says, all right, I can make at least 40–50% gross margin. And maybe my net margin, I'm not profitable because my overhead is too high. Again, if I'm using terms that you're less familiar with, please tell me. I'm happy to break it down into more details to just kind of go through and explain a little bit more what those mean.
You say the minimum is around 50% for the margin?
Eventually your gross margin, if you have 50%, that's super healthy. But you need to have 40 or 50% to start with. Because basically your gross margin is your net revenues minus your cost. Your cost is your cost of goods sold, which will include things like your ingredient costs. Let's say in my business, right? It will include ingredient, it will include labor, it will include packaging, it will include actual facility direct overhead associated with that, right? And then after that, you have your operating costs. Your operating costs would be your, let's say, your office rental, all of your marketing costs, your general administration, like people that you hire, all of those. So you might find that, okay, first year maybe you just sell $100,000. You make a gross margin of, let's say, $50,000. So you've got decent gross margin. But because you have 3 people in the office that you're hiring, you're paying them 60 grand each, you're not making a net profit. But then you can argue and you can show that if you get enough revenues, your operating cost does not scale at the same rate as your costs. And that's when you become a viable business. Because your office, let's say, even if you sell $100,000 or if you sell $5 million, you could probably operate within the same office and the same structure. But of course, if you get to $50 or $100 million, you might need a different office. So you find that your fixed cost does not scale at the same rate as your actual revenues. Am I making sense so far? Yeah? That's following? So yeah, so that was also the reason why I shut down my online business. Because I looked at the margins, which is the margins that we had for our online business was actually pretty thin, even though we're selling directly to consumers. Because we're making this, detox kit that have 7 days, 5 meals, the number of permutations that needs to go through it, and then we are packing it by hand. There are 4 or 5 elements in a salad kit. You have like your organic greens, your homemade salad dressing, your nuts, your organic chicken that you have to cook and cut, and then you have to pack it. The labor cost was just so high. So it's just very difficult to scale. Whereas when we're making soups, we could make one single flavor, just thousands of them at one time, filled with machine. It was much easier to automate, so that eventually our gross margins are actually much, much better. Even though we're selling through this channel, like a distributor, a retailer, before we finally sell to the consumer. So I guess the main thing is to work out, and I didn't work those out when I first started. I was kind of like, oh yeah, I think there's an opportunity, I think customers want it, and I just jumped into it. And also some of the things that when you're thinking about starting the business, you want to really figure that out. It will waste you less time later on if you figure that out earlier up front. Let's see what else. Timing. I think timing is important as well. Like I mentioned, I started my online meal delivery program 10 years ago, way too ahead of its time when people weren't ready for it. And so there wasn't a lot of traction. I think that by 2010, 2011, there was a lot more appetite for it, and there are a lot more businesses jumping into it. So what you want to be is, you want to be innovative, but you do not want to be the lone runner running in the desert. Because if you're the only one running in the desert, you have to have a lot of money. Especially if you're, whereas if you're ahead of the pack, there's a little bit of momentum behind you, and that works much better. Or the other analogy that I always like to give is that, like surfing, right? You're out there paddling, but there's nothing there. Doesn't matter how hard you paddle, you're just not going to catch it. If it comes in and you're ready for it and you catch it, that's fantastic. But if that happens, that means that other people are all going to jump on it as well. Like what's happening with us now, we're now considered to be kind of like industry innovator. We're featured a lot in like frozen refrigerated magazines, a lot of different trade magazines. We were on New York Times. In January, we won awards in Prevention Magazine, Clean Eating Magazine, so on and so forth, which is awesome. But it also means that just last year, a bunch of other companies have started something similar, right? You have the Bone Broth, the Brudo Cafe in New York. They are now like cafe maybe in Portland or in LA, where they're doing all this bone broth cafe. And now Epic is jumping. Epic, the bar, the protein bar, the brand. They're jumping in with their bone broth of their own. There's another brand called Tio Gazpacho, just got an investment from a VC that's funded by General Mills. Yeah. So what we're saying now is that, I could take my time 5 years ago and kind of do it because I'm the only one doing it, and do it slowly. But all of a sudden, when I'm very trendy, when all the trends converge, it means that I'm not the only one there anymore. Everyone's going to jump into it. It means that then I have to be running really hard and really fast. If not, other companies will catch up and I'll be irrelevant in 5 years or in 3 years. So, the timing is everything. You do not want to be too late or too early. You just want to be slightly early. I think 1 or 2 years ahead is fine. Because if you're 10 years ahead of everyone else, you better have a lot of money and very deep pockets to last before it becomes actually trendy. Yeah. And I think finally, one interesting one, which is something that I learned in my business. I attended kind of one of those business classes that ICA, Inner City Advisors, a non-profit, they kind of ran a quick 10-week MBA short class at one point. And the speaker said, hire slowly, fire quickly. I'm not sure if you guys heard of that term before, that phrase. Hire slowly, fire quickly. It's actually very, very important. I used to think, wow, that is so heartless, Oh, you need to give people a chance if they're willing, to work it out, Shouldn't be so cruel, right? We're in here all about trying to create social impact or not. That seems very harsh. But then I really experienced it. Like I hired one of my very first employees who was the sister of a good friend. I think things kind of didn't work out. Sometime later she got a little bit disgruntled, unhappy and all that. And I tried to give her some equity and she wanted a lot more because she thought it was worth a lot more, which was way ahead of way more than what industry, the typical industry norms. And I kept her on for, I would say 6 to 9 months longer before eventually I let her go. And I decided that was a really bad thing. And that wasn't the only time it happened, right? Which is, you really need to fire quickly for a couple of reasons. Number one, the person is no longer interested in working for you, is not giving his or her best. You're just not getting good quality work. But number two, which is a bigger reason, is that their attitude and their general energy is going to pollute the entire company. And it's going to affect other people. And also either other people would then end up being demoralized, or they will be unhappy and they'll leave. Because then I had a different incident whereby I had a top performer left because she couldn't stand kind of the negative attitude and somewhat whininess of another person in the company. But I didn't really notice too much of that because I was traveling so much for work. Right? But finally when she quit, she kind of shared with me about it. I was going, oh shit. You think that it's fine, you want to work with them, but honestly, if it's not going to work out and you know it in your gut, it's better to act fast. Because I've never I've never had an occasion where I thought, shit, I fired that person too quickly. Never. So same thing, actually you need to trust your gut when it comes to hiring people. It's really important to hire the right person or to go into business with the right people as well. And so I'm going to give you kind of a few tips on how do you decide who to go into business with. You want to make sure that you are so comfortable with this person that you're going to business with that you can say no to them and that you know that they'll be comfortable with that and you guys will still be able to work well together. If you ever think that you might have to tiptoe around the person at some point and be polite about your views and not really sharing what you truly believe in or what you feel, this person definitely do not go into business with that. That's kind of, I think, one big tip. Because at some point, you might be good friends at first, but there'll always be difficult, very difficult moments that will come along in your business. And you want to make sure that, you can still have that really honest conversation with them and that they will be okay with it. Or you might be okay with it, but they might not be. But you think that, oh no, their feelings might be hurt quite easily and they're quite sensitive and you're not sure if you can be truly honest with that person, think twice. Think twice about going to business with them. And in terms of hiring, these days, in terms of how do I hire, when I interview people, I actually like to hire people who are introspective. I ask a lot. There's competence, about what skills that they have, and then what experience they have, and then kind of the personality and the fit. The most important thing to me is the personality and the fit. And it's something very nebulous. Sometimes you can't really pin it down. But to me, when I talk about fit, a lot of it is about, for example, one of the things that's and it's very different based on who you are, so everybody will have a different definition of what fit is. But for me, I want someone who is open to feedback or who is introspective. So I always ask questions like, give me your strengths and give me your weaknesses, but I'll ask for 3 or more. Because most people come prepared. You guys probably will know that, if you've done internships or if you're going out and getting an interview, you get ready for your, what one of your weaknesses. One of the things that really annoy me, and I share this with my team, was that when people tell me their weakness, which is actually meant to be a strength, like, cut the BS. I'm not looking for that. Or people say, oh, I don't really have any weaknesses. Definitely not hired. If you think you're perfect, don't work for me, please. That means you have nothing to learn from us. So for me, that's why when I hire personally, I look for people that are open about their weaknesses. It's okay because everyone has weaknesses. I have my own weaknesses, and if they don't know about it, or they can't articulate it, that to me is an issue. So that's what I look for when I talk about fit, for example. And so for you guys as well, when you're looking to hire, when you're looking to set up your businesses or trying to figure out who to partner with, think a lot more about fit. I think that's as important as expertise and experience. Yeah, so those are just some of the thoughts that I have. I'm going to open it up. Questions, thoughts, what do you guys want to know more about? Questions that you have, anything you want to share?
How do you feel about indigo?
How do I feel about?
Indigo. The app.
How do I feel?
The app.
Oh, Indigo.
How do I feel? Indigo app?
What is it?
No.
Indigo.
Indiegogo? No.
Instacart?
Yeah.
Instacart.
How do I feel about Instacart? I think Instacart is great for the consumers. I like it. I like a lot of these delivery apps. I think as a consumer, it's awesome. I don't know what their cost structure looks like, and whether, I don't know, because they could be like Uber, where, the drivers don't actually make that much, but they're using a lot of spare capacity to actually make use of something, and then they're taking a commission on it, and so they don't have to invest a lot of money in it. So I would say that as a consumer, I love things like Uber, Instacart, Airbnb because it's all about using excess capacity that's available and they're creating a platform and not actually owning a lot of the assets. So when you're doing it that way, I think you could have a good business model to scale very rapidly without investing a lot of the capital assets. But I'm not sure, I don't know enough about how much they're spending, for example, on customer acquisition. I don't know what sort of margins they're actually taking to be able to fuel that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Go.
Can I ask you, what did you study and where?
Sure, I actually studied in Singapore. I studied NTU. And my major was actually in communication studies. So not in business at all. So in communication studies, and I majored in research. So I studied things like communication research, which was helpful. I mean, the things that were helpful that stayed with me when I went to management consulting, it was just very basic things about logical reasoning, which is how do you define a problem? And how do you break down the problem and how do you go about solving it? Which you can get in many of the other courses. And that was very useful for me. I think that on hindsight, things that could have been useful as well maybe would be basic business terms, like things like, understanding your margins, costs, so on and so forth. I didn't study that in school. I kind of picked that up afterwards in my business career, learning about those. But if you come with that upfront, it could be helpful as well. But I think the most important thing was about, I have a lot of interns in my company, and I was just giving them kind of a talk today, and I feel that the one thing that you have to master, whether you start a business or whichever career you go into, is time management and managing a to-do list. Like, people take that for granted, but one of the hardest things that I think our interns learn is about, you're always, and as an entrepreneur as well, there will always be more things that you have to do than you have time for. So how do you prioritize? But in order to prioritize effectively, you need to keep track of what you have to do. So are you even organized enough to keep track of all the things that you're supposed to do? Because if you don't keep track of what you have to do, things fall between the cracks, they could come back to bite you. So you have to be able to manage that to-do list. Just kind of a quick flip through, you'll find that my whole notebook is filled with lists. I cross things out, I have things left over, I move them to another list. And for me personally, I like it you guys can use whatever technology you want, but for me, I find that when you write it down, it's easier to organize. Or today's talk is on the mind map. I didn't prepare a document, I just did another mind map, for another talk that was given. You really need to be organized, and I think that's critical, and you can learn that in whatever course you're doing. Because if you cannot manage your time well, you'll find that either you're working 20 hours a day and getting burnt out, or you're not going to be able to get things done. Oh, wait, sorry. You had a question.
Is it difficult to keep your values as you're trying to scale up? Like you mentioned, your competitor went to the General Mills VC.
Yeah.
Is that ever something that was tempting for you, or how do you deal with that?
The thing is that I think it's important not to see big companies as evil, but to really understand exactly what you're going to get out of them and how do you manage, how do you maintain control, right? And what are they going to give you? Don't put things into a bucket, because nothing in life is black and white, There's always a lot of gray, right? So for example, if I were to take money from, let's say, a VC, and I actually did take some money from a accelerator, it's about how are you going about taking that money in a way that allows you not to lose control of your company, right? That is the critical question. So, and there are different ways of doing that, which is, the thing is that in tech it's different. In the tech world, it's all about pre-revenue. You have an idea, go raise money. It's easy to raise money depending on the climate that you're in. And I would say that the earlier you raise money, the lower your valuation would be, regardless. And therefore the more of the company you'll be giving away. So usually you want to hang on to as much of the company as you can, so you want to raise money. That is kind of a fine balance. You don't want to raise money too early, because otherwise you'll be giving away a lot and then you might lose control of it. But also you don't want to raise money too late if there's a lot of competition out there and you do need that money in order to accelerate growth. So it's very specific to what is it that you're doing and when you're doing it. But then when you raise money as well, there are many different things that you can do about it, which is how much do you actually give away? What kind of shares do you give away? Is it preferred? Is it common? You know, there's a lot more to it, and what kind of rights do they have? Do they have a board seat or do they not have a board seat? You know, so, and who you raise money from. Remember, raising money is like getting married. Very early for you guys to think about. You know, it's not like Tinder. It's not like a one night stand or whatever, or just dating. You know, think about it like getting married to that person, and it's worse than getting married because, you know, if you don't like the person, you can get divorced. But if you raise money from the wrong investors, you might be stuck with them forever, or you get a divorce and they have everything. You know, so think of it that way, right? So then you really want to, like, it's kind of like, so if you think of it that way, if you're dating someone, you want to make sure you like them, right? You make sure that your values are aligned so that you're not fighting with them all the time. Same thing for investors. You know, everybody thinks that if you guys have a really cool idea and can get money and shop around, don't just take money from the first person that offers it to you. You know, find out more, what's their vision for your business? Where do they see it going? You know, how do they work with you? You know, what do they want? What do they see? Who are some of the investments that they've placed in? Can you talk to their, you know, some of the investments that they've made? Ask a lot of questions, you know, like you wouldn't, especially at the ages that you guys are at right now, you're not going to get married after a month. You're not going to get married to the first person that you see. Likewise, with investors. So if you find the right investor, it could be that, you know, you can tell them that these are my values, this is how my brand is built around it. Like let's say Honest Tea got purchased by Coca-Cola, right? So people are saying that Honest Tea sell out. But if their whole brand is around organic, fair trade, and that's part of their brand, and that's what consumers are buying that, have those changed? Because if it's built into an integral part of your brand, which is what the value is, it is there, right? So I would say that give it a little bit more thought. It doesn't mean it's a sellout. It depends on who exactly the investor is, what their values are, and also depends on how you structure the deal and whether you think you can preserve. Because it's true, if you get the wrong investors, your values can be compromised.
So you talked a little bit about how companies like Spoon Rocket and stuff are spending too much money on customer acquisition costs, marketing and whatnot. So how did you still like balance between marketing and customer acquisition and whatnot by going through the retail chains? Like, what kind of exposure are you doing?
You know, so when you're going to retail, like, for example, I'll just give you an example of, let's say, Spoon Rocket or Plated, or what else is in here, Munchery, right? You see Facebook ads come out, you get $20 free, lots of $20 free that they're giving away. And $20 free, then let's say if you're buying something, you might only be buying $30 or less than that, right? And let's say if you buy it only once, because a lot of our customer acquisition cost has to do with what is the lifetime value of the customer, you know, how many times they buy from you again. But let's say if you only buy once, that $20 out of $30, you know, that is a lot. You're not even breaking even. Whereas when we go into retail, we're doing a discount. The discount is maybe 50 cents or $1 on that product. It's not $20, right? So your percentage spend is much, much lower. It's not that high. Because a lot of it is about, if I do a deal with, or like if Safeway picks up my products and there's no free pick. In the grocery world, there are different things. There's the concept of free fill, slotting fees, or nothing at all. Slotting fees are like, let's say a big supermarket chain say that, okay, if you want me to carry your products, it's $10,000 per SKU. Or there might be, you know, Whole Foods might say, I've got 400 stores, if you want all my stores to carry your products, I need one free case per SKU per store. So if I'm carrying, you know, 6 SKUs, it becomes 6 cases times 400 that you have to give away. Right? Or there are some chains that say, oh, nothing at all, I just want to buy your products. So you start off that way, you know, like Buy Right or, you know, Berkeley or whatever. They just carry your product straight away, there's no marketing spend. You know, the marketing spend could be time, I'm going there to do a demo.